Every single day, something in your kitchen is quietly working against you, and it's not what you think. This invisible enemy is responsible for millions of deaths every year. Yet most people over 60 have no idea it's slowly damaging their heart, brain, and kidneys right now. In this video, we will expose the silent killer hiding in your kitchen and tell you what to use instead. But here's what's truly shocking. The solution has been hiding in plain sight for decades, and it's so simple that you can start using it today. In fact, one small change to what you sprinkle on your food could literally add years to your life and make you feel decades younger. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how this hidden kitchen danger is affecting your health and discover the simple swap that research shows can make a 70-year-old have the health profile of someone 14 years younger. You'll understand why 98% of Americans are unknowingly putting themselves at risk. And most importantly, you'll learn the exact steps to protect yourself starting today. Let me ask you something. When you sit down for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, do you ever think about salt? Most of us don't. We simply reach for the shaker and add a pinch here and there. But here's what researchers have discovered. High salt intake is now the leading dietary risk factor for death worldwide. Think about that for a moment. Of all the things we worry about in our diet, salt has quietly become the biggest threat to our health. It's estimated to be causing millions of deaths every year, mainly through its effects on blood pressure and the increased risk of stroke, heart attack, and kidney damage that follows. Now, you might be thinking, but I feel fine. My blood pressure seems okay. Here's the frightening truth. High blood pressure is still called the silent and invisible killer because it rarely causes symptoms. You can feel perfectly healthy, while your blood pressure is slowly damaging your arteries, your heart, and your brain. This silent killer is one of the most powerful predictors of our leading causes of death. But there's hope, and it comes from understanding something our ancestors knew instinctively. Thousands of years ago, our ancestors ate a completely different way than we do today. They consumed diets that were very rich in potassium and naturally low in sodium. They ate fruits, vegetables, roots, and tubers. Their meals came directly from the earth, packed with the minerals their bodies needed to thrive. Today, this pattern has been completely flipped upside down. We've shifted from traditional plant-based diets high in potassium and low in sodium to a modern diet filled with salty processed foods that have been stripped of potassium. Here's a statistic that should concern every one of us. 98% of Americans don't even reach the recommended minimum daily intake of potassium. That means almost everyone you know, including possibly yourself, is not getting enough of this vital mineral that your body needs to function properly. Potassium is considered a nutrient of public health concern, precisely because so few of us get enough of it. Low potassium intake isn't just a minor issue. It's directly linked to high blood pressure and cardiovascular disease. Yet how many times has your doctor suggested you eat more foods high in potassium, like fruits and vegetables, to help control your blood pressure? Probably never. Even though multiple research studies have now confirmed that high potassium intake appears to reduce the risk of stroke. Let me share some numbers that might surprise you. Research shows that higher sodium intake is associated with a 20% increased risk of dying prematurely. But here, as the flip side, higher potassium intake was associated with a 20% reduced risk of dying prematurely. Now, you might wonder, is this just because people who eat less sodium and more potassium tend to eat healthier foods overall? That's a fair question. After all, sodium is found in processed junk foods, while potassium is concentrated in healthy foods like beans and leafy greens. But here's how we know sodium is directly harmful. Randomized controlled trials, the gold standard of medical research, show that when people reduce their sodium intake, their blood pressure goes down. Similarly, when people are given extra potassium, their blood pressure also decreases. This isn't just correlation. This is cause and effect. So what can you do about this? Here's the solution, and it's surprisingly simple. Instead of using regular table salt, which is sodium chloride, start using a salt substitute made with potassium chloride. You can find these zero sodium salt substitutes in most grocery stores. They look just like regular salt. They taste very similar to regular salt, and they give you the flavor you're used to. But instead of flooding your body with harmful sodium, you're giving it the potassium it desperately needs. Potassium chloride is a naturally occurring mineral salt. It's obtained the same way we get regular sodium salt. Since we get too much sodium and not enough potassium in our modern diet, this simple swap becomes a win-win solution. Now, I want to be clear. The best way to increase potassium intake is through whole, healthy plant foods. Fruits and vegetables have all sorts of beneficial compounds besides potassium. But for those times when you want to add salt to your food, this swap can make a real difference. How big of a difference can this simple change make? We now have 10 different randomized controlled trials showing that just swapping in some potassium chloride for regular salt can lead to significant reductions in blood pressure. In people with high blood pressure, these studies suggest that salt substitutes may even help prevent high blood pressure from developing in the first place. But the research goes even further. In one study, households had their regular salt replaced with a salt substitute that was just 25% potassium chloride. At that level, most people either could untell the difference or actually preferred the taste of the salt with potassium mixed in. The results were remarkable. Using even this quarter-strength salt substitute was associated with cutting the risk of developing high blood pressure in half. In half, just from making this one simple change in the kitchen. But wait, it gets even better. Researchers followed people for years to see if this change actually saved lives. In one study at a veterans' retirement home, 5 kitchens were split into 2 groups for about 2.5 years. Half continued using regular salt, while the other half unknowingly used a 50-50 blend of regular salt and potassium chloride. Those in the half potassium group cut their risk of dying from cardiovascular disease by about 40% and lived up to nearly a year longer. The life expectancy difference at age 70 was equivalent to what would naturally occur over 14 years. In other words, just switching to half potassium salt appeared to effectively make people more than a decade younger. You might be wondering, how exactly does potassium protect your health? The benefits go far beyond just balancing out sodium's harmful effects. Research shows that potassium has several protective mechanisms working in your favor. First, potassium helps reduce the formation of blood clots that can cause heart attacks and strokes. Second, it helps prevent the hardening of your arteries, keeping your blood vessels flexible and healthy. Third, potassium reduces the generation of harmful free radicals that can damage your cells and accelerate aging. These protective effects mean that even independent of blood pressure changes, getting more potassium appears to reduce stroke risk. Your body uses potassium in many vital processes, and when you don't get enough, multiple systems start to suffer. Before we talk about solutions, it's important to understand where most of the sodium in your diet is actually coming from. You might be surprised to learn that the salt shaker on your table is not the main culprit. Most of the sodium Americans consume comes pre-packaged in the foods we buy. Processed meats like deli, turkey, ham, and bacon are loaded with sodium. Canned soups, even those that don't taste particularly salty, can contain a full day's worth of sodium in a single serving. Bread is another hidden source that surprises many people. A single slice of bread can contain 100 to 200 milligrams of sodium. And if you're eating sandwiches regularly, that adds up quickly. Even seemingly healthy foods like salad dressings, pasta sauces, and breakfast cereals can be significant sources of hidden sodium. The challenge is that food manufacturers use sodium not just for flavor, but as a preservative and to improve texture. This means that even foods that don't taste salty can be contributing to your daily sodium overload. While salt substitutes are a helpful tool, the best way to increase your potassium intake is through whole foods that are naturally rich in this vital mineral. Let me share some excellent options that are both delicious and easy to incorporate into your daily meals. Bananas are probably the most famous potassium-rich food, and for good reason. One medium banana contains about 400 milligrams of potassium. They're convenient, affordable, and can be added to breakfast cereals, smoothies, or enjoyed as a simple snack. But there are many other excellent sources. Sweet potatoes are potassium powerhouses, containing over 500 milligrams per medium potato. They're also rich in fiber and other beneficial nutrients. Avocados are another excellent choice, with nearly 700 milligrams of potassium in half an avocado. Leafy green vegetables like spinach and Swiss chard are loaded with potassium. 1 cup of cooked spinach contains over 800 milligrams. Orange juice, cantaloupe, honeydew melon, and white beans are also excellent sources. The key is variety. By including several potassium-rich foods in your diet each day, you can easily reach the recommended intake levels that most Americans are missing. You don't need to make dramatic changes overnight. In fact, it's better to make gradual adjustments that you can sustain long-term. Here's a practical approach to reducing sodium and increasing potassium in your daily routine. Start by replacing half of your regular salt with a potassium chloride salt substitute. Use this blend for cooking and seasoning your food. Most people find that they can't detect any difference in taste when they make this partial substitution. Next, begin reading food labels more carefully. Look for the sodium content per serving and try to choose products with less than 300 milligrams of sodium per serving when possible. This single habit can dramatically reduce your daily sodium intake. When shopping, focus on the perimeter of the grocery store where fresh foods are typically located. Fresh fruits, vegetables, and unprocessed meats naturally contain less sodium and more potassium than their processed counterparts. Right now, as we speak, there's a massive research study finishing up in China that involves 600 villages and more than 20,000 people. This study will give us an even clearer picture of just how much we can reduce stroke risk with salt substitution strategies. China is the perfect place for this research because up to 75% of their sodium intake comes from salt they add in their home kitchen or dining room, much like many of us do. In contrast, most sodium in the typical American diet comes pre-packaged in processed foods. But the principles of salt substitution remain the same. The preliminary results from smaller studies have been so promising that researchers around the world are paying attention. We're on the verge of having definitive proof that these simple changes can prevent millions of deaths and dramatically improve quality of life for older adults. As we age, our bodies become more sensitive to sodium and less efficient at processing it. Our kidneys don't work quite as well as they did when we were younger, and our blood vessels naturally become less flexible. This means that the dietary choices we make have an even greater impact on our health than they did in our younger years. Additionally, many medications commonly prescribed to older adults can affect how your body handles sodium and potassium. Some blood pressure medications, for example, can cause potassium levels to become too low, making dietary sources of potassium even more important. But here's the encouraging news. It's never too late to make these changes. Your body is remarkably adaptable, and research shows that people who adopt healthier sodium and potassium habits in their 60s, 70s, and beyond can still see significant improvements in their blood pressure and cardiovascular health within weeks or months. Let me give you some practical meal planning ideas that can help. You naturally reduce sodium while increasing potassium throughout your day. For breakfast, consider starting with a bowl of oatmeal topped with sliced banana and a handful of berries. This combination provides substantial potassium while being naturally low in sodium. If you usually add salt to your oatmeal, try using a small amount of potassium salt substitute instead. For lunch, focus on fresh ingredients rather than processed ones. A salad with leafy greens, avocado, and fresh vegetables provides multiple potassium sources. If you want to add protein, choose fresh chicken or fish over processed deli meats, which are typically very high in sodium. For dinner, consider baked sweet potato as a side dish instead of regular potatoes prepared with added salt. Season your vegetables with herbs and spices rather than salt, or use your potassium salt substitute sparingly. How you prepare your food can significantly impact both sodium and potassium content. When you boil vegetables, some of the potassium leaches into the cooking water. To preserve more potassium, try steaming, roasting, or vegetables instead. If you do boil vegetables, consider saving the cooking water to use as a base for soups. This water contains dissolved potassium and can add flavor to other dishes without adding sodium. When preparing meats, avoid adding salt during cooking. Instead, season with herbs, spices, lemon juice, or small amounts of potassium salt substitute. Many people find that they can reduce their salt usage significantly without sacrificing flavor when they experiment with other seasonings. Learning to read nutrition labels effectively is crucial for managing your sodium and potassium intake. On any packaged food, look for the sodium content per serving listed in milligrams. Aim for foods with less than 140 milligrams of sodium per serving, which is considered low sodium. Unfortunately, potassium content is not always listed on food labels, though this is changing as awareness grows. When potassium is listed, look for foods that provide at least 300 milligrams per serving to make a meaningful contribution to your daily intake. Here's a helpful comparison strategy. When choosing between similar products, always compare the sodium content. You might be surprised to find that one brand of soup contains 600 milligrams of sodium per serving, while another contains only 200 milligrams. Over time, these choices add up significantly. While potassium salt substitutes are safe for most people, there are some important considerations to keep in mind. If you have kidney disease or are taking certain medications, particularly ACE inhibitors or potassium-sparing diuretics, you should consult with your healthcare provider before using potassium salt substitutes. Some people with advanced kidney disease need to limit their potassium intake, making these substitutes inappropriate for their situation. Additionally, certain heart medications can affect potassium levels in your body. The good news is that for most healthy adults, including those with high blood pressure, potassium salt substitutes are not only safe but beneficial. However, it's always wise to discuss any significant dietary changes with your healthcare provider, especially if you're taking medications or have any chronic health conditions. The 7 simple strategies we've discussed today aren't just about preventing disease. They're about giving you the energy and vitality to enjoy your relationships, pursue your interests, and live life on your own terms for years to come. Which aspect of sodium and potassium balance resonates most with you? Are you ready to try salt substitutes in your cooking, or does focusing on potassium-rich whole foods appeal to you more? Maybe you're motivated to become a smarter shopper by reading labels more carefully. Whatever you choose to start with, remember that every small step counts. Your future self will thank you for the choices you make today. Which of these strategies will you try first? Have you already experimented with salt substitutes, or are you just learning about the importance of potassium? I'd love to hear about your experiences and any questions you might have about making these changes work in your daily life. Don't forget to subscribe, give this video a like, and share it with your loved ones.